There's an old saying in computer programming circles: garbage in, garbage out. It means that if the inputs into a system are incorrect, there's precisely zero chance of it generating the right outcome. Last week, we explored the twin concepts of above down, inside out, and below up, outside in. We covered how healing flows from the top down through the nervous system, but environmental information flows bottom up from the feet to the brain. If you missed it, I'd recommend you start there before today's discussion. I'll link to it in the comments below. This is a perfect example of a garbage in, garbage out situation. If one of your primary sensory organs, your foot, is encased in a squishy cushion, your shoe, and used almost exclusively on featureless, neurologically deadening surfaces, there's precisely zero chance of the system producing the correct outputs. In this case, those outputs being posture, gait, movement patterns, muscle activation sequences, joint position, spinal function, and overall efficiency and function. Basically everything that we want to optimize for the health of our patients. So today we're going to build on last week's conversation and cover one of the key physical mechanisms that completes the cycle between above down, inside out, and below up, outside in. This all fell into place for me watching an Anatomy Trains webinar while I was in Puerto Rico. It was a 4-hour deep dive into the function of the big toe. It's amazing what you can get done when your kids are on the other side of the world. Jody thought it was hilarious that I could spend an entire 4 hours on holidays learning about the big toe. I guess it's an example of my why of mastery showing up. I do love to go deep. If you're not sure what I'm talking about, check out my earlier episode on your why operating system. It'll be well worth your time. Again, I'll chuck a link in the comments below. This filled in some of the final pieces in the below, up, outside in theory and how it links up with the above down, inside out concept. This is the actual physical mechanism at play. We're going to get a little technical here and tie together several of the concepts that we've previously covered in the foot-brain connection, including foot anatomy, arch mechanics, myofascial meridians, tensegrity, force dynamics, and neurological feedback loops. So here we go. One of the new things I came across in the webinar was an interesting method of dividing the foot functionally into two distinct parts, the heel foot and the toe foot. This is not simply about describing the front and back of the foot. Rather, it's actually a medial lateral division of the foot into two functional units with opposing roles to play. Although I'd never seen the foot described that way, it makes sense. It's a conceptualization of how we actually use our foot rather than just a description of the static anatomy. The heel foot consists of the calcaneus, the cuboid, and the fourth and fifth metatarsals. It contains the lateral arch, which is inherently stable and rigid due to the triangular shape of the cuboid, which is wider on the top than the bottom. As you can see here in my model, we've got this nice triangular cuboid that really stabilizes that lateral arch. This allows it to function like a capstone in an architectural arch. I'll link to my previous episode on arch mechanics below if you want a detailed explanation. The function of the heel foot is to receive force. It gives the foot adaptability, and it's involved in the early stance phase as the foot receives load when we heel strike. It's active in dorsiflexion. The toe foot, on the other hand, consists of the talus, navicular, and first three metatarsals. It includes the medial arch, which is inherently dynamic. Its structure makes it highly movable, flexible, and able to transmit force. And again, you can see that on my model. Notice this medial arch, that the bones are much more rounded, the joint surfaces are much more rounded, which allows a lot more glide and a lot more compression of the arch. So the function of the toe foot is dynamic. Its job is to organize how the foot ultimately takes the force absorbed through the heel foot and then turns it into propulsion. It flattens during pronation as the force is transferred from the heel foot to the toe foot, and then it raises and stiffens with supination during the terminal phase of stance when it becomes a rigid lever. It's active during plantar flexion. So here's the simple way to think about it. The heel foot receives force. The toe foot directs force. And there's a fascial connection, the link between the foot and the rest of the body. Both the heel foot and the toe foot are directly tied into one of the Anatomy Trains myofascial meridians. These are the pathways that force follows as it travels from the ground up into the body and then from the body back down into the ground. This smooth transfer of force back and forth is what allows us to stand upright, walk, run, and jump. The toe foot ties directly into the deep front line, giving us the ability to create stability and propulsion. Myofascially, It transfers force up through the tibialis posterior, the deep posterior compartment, the adductors, the pelvic floor, the diaphragm, and ultimately right up into the deep neck, jaw, and tongue. It's our body's central stabilizing system. At the foot, here's what it does. It lifts and maintains the medial arch. It creates a rigid lever for push-off. It transfers force up through the core. When the system's weak, it shows up as medial arch collapse, poor first ray function, weak toe-off, inefficient gait, shortened stride, limited hip extension, pelvic floor and core weakness, and instability. This is why the toe-foot dysfunction often results in things like lower back pain or pelvic instability, tight hip flexors, weak glutes, tight hamstrings, and any other pelvic floor stuff like incontinence, or even into the diaphragm, breathing dysfunction, sexual dysfunction, poor digestion, medial knee issues. All of these can relate to the function of the medial arch through the deep front line. The heel foot, on the other hand, ties into the lateral line, giving us adaptability, balance, and shock absorption. Myofascially, it transfers force up the chain through the peroneus longus and brevis, the IT band, the lateral hip stabilizers, primarily glute medius, and the obliques and intercostals. What the lateral line gives us is the ability to stand on one leg, or single leg stance as it's called, which is essential for walking. It controls side-to-side balance. It allows adaptation to uneven ground. If this system is dysfunctional, we end up experiencing poor balance, ankle instability, lateral hip overload, ITB issues, hip bursitis, spinal degeneration through uncontrolled impact forces, lateral knee issues. There's a hidden connection between these two fascial lines, the deep front line and the lateral line. They're functionally tied together through a fascial sling that runs under the foot, effectively connecting tibialis posterior and peroneus longus. It creates tension and lift, providing dynamic stability for our arches. I described this mechanism in detail in my earlier episode on foot dissection. Again, I'll link to it in the comments below. So, in summary, our heel foot and the lateral line that it's attached to feels the ground, so it's our afferent input. It adapts to the environment, it keeps us balanced, and our toe foot in the deep front line creates stability, drives propulsion. It's our efferent output. It transfers force throughout the body. To put it in a simple analogy that patients can easily understand, the outside of the foot is like our suspension system. The inside of our foot is like the engine, and the muscles underneath act like cables in a suspension bridge, holding everything together. The beauty of Better Balance Orthotics is that they improve all three of these functions. Through stimulating and engaging the muscles, nerves, and fascia in the feet, they activate the suspension system, they improve the efficiency of the engine, and they strengthen the cables holding it all together. The more that I research and learn on this topic, the more deeply I come to appreciate what an elegantly simple solution they provide to one of our most universal physical modern stresses, the ground that we walk on. There's a neurological loop here too. This is where above down, inside out meets below up, outside in. As we discussed last week, our foot's not just a mechanical structure. It's a highly potent, highly innervated sensory organ that drives the brain. When we map that on today's functional breakdown of the foot, here's how it lines up. The heel foot is our sensory input, our afferent. It's the below up, outside in mechanism. Our toe foot, on the other hand, is the motor output. It's our efferent output. It's the above down, inside out component. The neurological role of the heel foot is to feed information to the brain. It's the first to strike the ground. It's rich in mechanoreceptors, constantly updating the brain about surface texture, pressure, speed of movement, and directional change. As a result, the heel foot detects where we are in space, adjusts our balance in real time, and drives reflexes for postural control. When we wear shoes and walk on featureless surfaces, we deaden the input from this system. This produces slower reflexes, poor balance, less efficient movement, and increased injury risk. On the other hand, the neurological role of the toe foot is to execute the brain's response. It takes the sensory input generated by the heel foot and converts it into force and movement. It does that by stabilizing the arch, activating the intrinsic muscles, creating a rigid lever for propulsion, and driving coordinated movement up the biomechanical chain. Our brain is constantly shifting between these two systems throughout the stance phase of every single step we take, coordinating pronation and supination, dorsiflexion and plantarflexion, heel strike and toe off, ADIO and BUOI. Information must flow both ways for the system to operate effectively. So here's what the whole cycle looks like. Heel foot feels the ground and sends sensory data up to the brain. The brain processes the input through the cerebellum and the cortex to coordinate a response. And then the toe foot executes the movement. It stabilizes and propels. And then we get new sensory input as we heel strike again, and the whole cycle continues. It's a closed loop control system, and it's occurring with every step we take. Input, processing, output, feedback, repeat. If the input's poor, the brain is guessing and the motor output is delayed or inaccurate, leading to instability and compensation, and in worst case, injury. But if the output is poor, well, the brain might have good info, but it can't execute effectively, again leading to overload, inefficiency, and potentially injury. So we need both components of the system operating efficiently if we want to experience healthy posture, balance, gait, movement, and coordination. This is why above, down, inside, out is expressed best when it's counterbalanced with below, up, outside, in. It's like the yin and yang of physical existence. Nature spent millions of years fine-tuning this exquisitely balanced system for an environment that most of us no longer live in on a daily basis. Some evolutionary biologists have suggested it was the evolution of our foot and bipedal gait that actually drove the expansion of our brain and our rise to become the dominant species on the planet. But sadly, modern life has cut our brains off from that driving evolutionary force. It's why I believe that Better Balance Orthotics are a perfect and vital complement to chiropractic care. If they're not a regular part of your care plan, you're missing a golden opportunity to create even more amazing results for your patients. Cheers. Have a great week.